Reptichip sets the standard for reptile substrates. Made from the highest quality coconut available anywhere in the world, Reptichip allows enthusiasts and keepers to provide their reptiles with the necessary humidity and thermoregulation required for your animals to thrive. You can support the podcast by heading to reptichip.com/snakeboy or visit the link in the description below. This episode is brought to you in part by Exoterra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use Exoterra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, Exoterra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. Exoterra. Make your reptiles feel at home. This episode is brought to you in part by Unlimited Exotic Pets. Every day is Veranda Day for Nick Lillis, and it shows. At Unlimited Exotic Pets, Nick produces high-quality monitor lizards with a deep commitment to ethical care practices and top-tier nutrition. These aren't just pets. They're responsibly bred, ethically raised animals. Whether you're looking for a new companion, starting a breeding project, or anything in between, Nick has you covered. Unlimited Exotic Pets, keeping and breeding quality without limitations. Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. All right, well, welcome to episode 83 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm joined by Scott Eipper, and we're going to be talking about the new book, Snakes of Australia. But first, I just kind of want to talk about you, get to know you a little bit better. When did your fascination with reptiles and snakes start? How did you get to where you're at right now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Melbourne, in southern Victoria, in Australia, and then was running around as a kid, as kids do, chasing critters. So chasing lizards and stuff, and then I came across a very small tiger snake when I was very, very young. No snakes in Victoria, in that part of Victoria, are harmless. They're all venomous. Somehow got it into a bottle without getting bitten. Took it home. Got in a hell of a lot of trouble from my father for bringing it home. My father went and took it back to where I found it and then let it go. He'd sort of grown up on farm, so he was used to dealing with snakes and stuff like that. But he didn't see a reason to kill them or anything like that, which was pretty unusual now thinking back on it, because most of the time, most people were killing snakes back then. And yeah, let it go, and basically it was like a war of attrition between him and me about, bringing home lizards and snakes and all that sort of stuff, and then him taking them back out and releasing them again. Eventually, I won out. So I started keeping venomous snakes seriously at the age of about 10 years old, and cut my teeth on species that, looking back on it now, I'm damn lucky that I didn't have too many major issues when I was younger. And yeah, it is what it is. I wouldn't recommend it to somebody else to do the same thing, but a lot of us in Australia have sort of had that same sort of baptism of fire, I suppose. Um, and then sort of moved off into things like pythons and stuff like that as you get older. Hmm.
That's pretty wild. I mean, I have a 10-year-old, so I'm just thinking about him like keeping venomous snakes in captivity. Like that's such a bizarre concept.
So
Did you I
whereabouts are
mean,
you?
I'm in Florida.
Right. Okay. So, to give you an idea, a tiger snake's, I mean, look, it depends if you're a mouse or not, right? At the end of the day, the way snake venom affects rodents and mice is a little bit different to how it affects people. But the bite from a tiger snake was effectively, without any venom, was a death sentence, basically.
Wow.
So you weren't getting away with it. And that was for a healthy adult. A bite to a child, yeah, pretty much. You're in a lot of trouble. And people die to this day from tiger snakes. Um,
Jeez.
and brown snakes and copperheads and all sorts of things that we deal with over here. Um, but yeah, I mean, it just goes to show too that these things don't want to bite you either.
Yeah.
So,
Did you so how many venomous snakes were you keeping at such a
uh,
young age?
oh, look, it wasn't huge numbers. It wasn't until I sort of was, you know, 13, 14, I had 20 to between 20 and 50 venomous snakes.
Wow.
And by the time I was 14, I was keeping things like taipans. So,
Jeez.
um, yeah, not something I'd recommend. Certainly not something that I'd do these days.
Yeah.
Would be to sell a iPad to a kid. Um, but yeah, I mean that was sort of my baptism, I suppose. I was also working with some other snakies that were more experienced at the time, and so I was working with these things. I'd worked with brown snakes for many years before I'd moved on to taipans, and was keeping taipans, inland taipans first, and then I moved from inlands onto coastals, and I bred coastal taipans at 15 years old.
Jeez.
So,
And and what did you get into as far as pythons?
um, well, the first python I ever got was an olive python, um, and I got that in about 1988, um, and he died this week.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that was last Monday. I lost Cuddles. So Cuddles was wild collected from Graham Gow. So Graham Gow wrote the Complete Guide to Reptiles of Australia back in the 80s, and he had a catch permit for all of snakes and stuff like that. So this particular snake had been caught by Gow as an adult in the Darwin region, and yeah, that was a so I've had Cuddles for many, many years, and so I use Cuddles for wildlife demonstrations and stuff like that up until about 18 months ago when you really started to get considerably older. And then we decided to retire him from doing demonstrations and stuff like that. So he was a real ambassador for things, but he also happened to be probably the longevity holder as well because he was a 3 meter long adult when he was sent down to me in 1988. So the anticipation would be that they would grow slower than what they do in captivity, and for an olive python to get to 3 meters long, um, anywhere between 5 and 8 years. So that snake was probably born in the wild, hatched out somewhere between 1975 and 1982.
Jeez.
So puts that snake at anywhere between 43 and 50 years of age, I suppose. So,
Wow.
yeah. So if you keep them properly, they can live for a bloody long time.
Man, so how do you keep your how do you keep a python alive for almost 40 years in captivity? What are some secrets?
um, Honestly, I mean, we bring everything down in winter. Okay, so everything comes down in temperature. We don't leave anything warm over winter or anything like that. They all come down to an appropriate temperature. We don't feed the hell out of our animals. Um, the metabolic cost to convert their systems when they feed is quite considerable. I don't know if you've ever dealt with animals that haven't been feeding for a really long time, and if you give them a big meal when they first get started, when they come back out of a cool period or anything like that, they'll often regurgitate a meal, or you'll even have some snakes just drop dead if they get
Wow.
too big a meal. It's because of the physiological changes that the snakes go through. Their muscles, their heart muscle increases in size, their blood thickens. There's all these physiological changes with this change while they're trying to digest their food. And it's a cost. It's a physical cost to the animals that they don't get initially until they get the calorific sort of value from the food, and then are able to metabolize it out into fats and store it away. So um, having big feeds when those animals come back out of cooling is a major issue. So what we do is we give them really small meals when they first are coming out of coming out of cooling, and then they'll have another two sort of normal smallish meals before they move into their regular sort of feeding schedule. And then after, for large pythons, I'm only feeding the large pythons sort of anywhere between 9 and 12 times a year, I suppose,
Wow.
in total. Now they get good sized meals during that time. But that's what a lot of pythons are designed to do. They're not meant to eat every other day. They're certainly not meant to eat every week. They don't need. It's not feeding day on a Thursday. I find it quite funny when I hear people talk about feeding and go, "Oh, I can't get my rodents off Joe Blogs or the animals. It's going to miss a feed because it's going into a shed." It's fine. It's designed to do that. If you're really worried about the food, give it 2 mice the following week, or 2 rats the following week, or something like that. They don't need too much food.
So do you feed like every with an adult python? I mean, when do you consider a python an adult? At what age are you like, all right, I'm going to really dial back the feeding? I mean, the way, I've talked to so many people, and it seems like the majority of people say, okay, when it's a year or 2 years old, you feed it every 7 to 14 days, we'll say, and then it gets to be beyond 2 to 3 years old. Now you slow it down to every 14 to 21 days, right? And then, or do you treat the animals as individuals and go off of how quickly they burn calories? I mean, it seems like some of my snakes burn it so much faster than others, and others just seem to metabolize food more efficiently.
Yeah. So colubroids, they metabolize food much faster, right? So corn snakes and stuff like that are going to process food faster than, say, a python. Um, Dipsadids also process food quite quickly. Elapids process food quite quickly. Whereas viperids, crotalids, pythons, boas, they all metabolize their food slower. All right, so they don't need necessarily. They need probably larger meal. All right, but they don't necessarily need as frequent meals. Okay, so that's an important thing. It also depends on what you're feeding them as well, and how large your meal. Right, so some certain species of snakes are designed to eat really large meals, and as a result, they tend to get really large. Okay, so they can accommodate that, but an African rock python, for instance, is not eating a small Thompson's gazelle every other week, right?
Yeah.
So they're designed to probably eat 3 or 4 times a year, all right? And they'll eat a really large meal 3 or 4 times a year, but they can't eat gazelles when they're little either. So they go through these ontogenetic shifts, and so they may go from eating rats and mice when they're small to larger rats or larger rodents as they get a bit bigger, into the 5 kilo sort of mammal type size, so the 10-pound mammal type size for the people in the US, before getting onto those really large prey items. So it depends on what you're talking about. Um, so in Australia, we've effectively got sort of 4 different sizes of pythons, I suppose. We've got small pythons, which are things like your antareses. And then you've got things like your medium-sized pythons, which would include things like womas and carpet pythons and even water pythons, I suppose. And then you've got your large pythons, which would be things like black-headed pythons and olives. Uh, and then you've got your very large pythons, which are your Somalia and your narrow Noctifiler python, the Pelly pythons. And so, those animals can get, upwards of 5 meters long. And so
Jeez.
they are purely giant snakes. Um, Same thing with scrubbies. We've got, Somalia kinghorny can get to over 6 meters long. Right. There's an
Jeez.
unreliable report of one that was 8.5 meters from 1922. And the guy that found it
God.
was a herper. No specimen in the museum or anything like that, which is a bit dodgy. But yeah, but like the biggest one I've personally seen was 17 feet.
Wow. That is a
Right.
big snake.
It's a big snake, and there's video of that same snake. I'd actually had surgery, so I wasn't actually allowed to. I wasn't meant to pick up anything over 2 kilos at the time, but that was a fucking big snake. And I'm not the smallest guy out there, that's for sure. And then videotape of me putting my foot next to this thing, and it's a big, big scrub python, head on it, sort of like that, right?
I think
When I
I
grabbed it by the hand, I couldn't. It's like a two-hand thing to try and hold it. And then so with that
wow.
suicide loop that you get from a large python, right? Well, you got to control that first loop, because if it throws that first loop over the top of you're cactus, right? You're done. There's no antivenom for lack of oxygen. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, right, you got to be careful. And that's why in the end I was like, right, I can't actually capture this snake. I can't hold on to this snake because there wasn't a safe way for me to do it. It was too big to
Man.
try and catch by myself, particularly when I was, sort of dealing with surgery. So, but yeah, it was an incredible animal. But yeah, got some video of it and all the rest of it. That video is up on YouTube. So, yeah,
Yeah, I need to
it's
look at that. I know I walked
yeah,
by the TV. My kids watch Jack Randall,
yeah,
and I went walking by the TV one day, and I think he was pulling a kinghorn eye out of a tree or something, and just seeing it, I'm like, oh my god, that thing's enormous. That thing is huge.
yeah. They're certainly big.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was mind blowing how big it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll have to check your video out because I love seeing big snakes, especially ones that aren't as common. I mean, there's so many videos on nature documentaries of guys rolling around with anacondas in the water and things like that. But some of the Australian giants, you don't get to see those too often.
well, how I found this thing is I was using a technique called eye shining. And eye shining is where you use a head torch, and let's put the head torch here. Right. And so you put your head torch on, like so, right, and you get the torch down as close down to your eyes as possible, right. And
Uh-huh.
so when the light's coming out, you're getting the reflection back of the retinas of the animal coming back at you. All right, so that's why it's important to have the light as close to your eyes as possible, because otherwise the reflection doesn't come back. And the eye shine on Python is extremely directional, so you don't get a lot of sort of sideways sort of pickup on it. Anyway, so I've seen this thing probably from oh, 70 meters away, I suppose. And I see these two eyes that are about that far apart. So for the guys that aren't watching this, it's about 3.5 inches wide. And I'm like, they're pretty bright. That's probably like a small crocodile sitting off to the side. Well, as you do, you say small crocodile, you want to go and check it out. So I walked up to it, and I remember getting to within about 20 meters of it, and I could sort of make out what it was in the dark. It's like, this is a fucking scrubby. This is amazing. Um, and I was like, right, okay, what the hell? This is pretty cool. And then I was looking at this thing, and it just kept going and going and going. I'm like, that is a massive snake.
Wow.
It was the largest snake I'd ever seen in the wild, by an absolute country mile. So, and like the size difference between like a 4 meter scrub and this thing was just astronomical. It was so much fatter, it was so much bigger, so much stronger. Um,
Mm.
and then its head was in proportion for its body as well. This is the other thing you see in captivity. You often see these snakes with these tiny little heads because they've been fed too much food when they were younger, and they've been sort of power fed. and they get these small pinheads without sort of any neck and any strength and all the rest of it. So, sort of going back, and we've sort of gone through a bit of a detour. Um, Getting back to what we were talking about before with regards to raising your snakes, it's important that they get enough food initially to do the growing that they need to do. But then when they start to really slow up, then you should start to actually slow the food intake a little bit. It's also important that the animals have got enough room to be able to move around properly. They need to be able to sort of go up and down. Rack systems are okay for certain species of things, but they aren't necessarily a one size fits all for every species out there. So I'm certainly not anti-rack keeping or anything like that, but I suppose the question that I find myself asking more frequently these days is, am I keeping for the convenience of myself, or am I keeping for the betterment of the animal? And if the answer is that I'm making it convenient for myself, then maybe I need to ask myself the question, should I be keeping this species, or should I be keeping something else, or not keeping anything in that particular case? So, as you get older, you get more philosophical, I suppose, about some of these questions too.
No, that's like one of the biggest debates or topics of discussion, I think, in the hobby, and I think it's an important one to have. I think that there's absolutely a place for racks and tubs, especially with younger animals or animals that are prone to escape, that are small, and what are you going to do if even if you're breeding 10 pairs of snakes, like if you have 10 pairings and you end up with all these eggs and hatchlings, in a season, what are you supposed to do with those? There's a line that if you're doing it professionally, you're going to need racks and tubs and everything. And I think that, like you said, I think that maybe just a balance and a nuanced approach is probably the best thing there. Like you said, actually thinking about whether or not you're doing it to make your life easier, or if it's, for the animal. And I think that for socializing younger snakes too, it's less traumatic for them to be able to easily take them out of a tub than fight them to take them out of like an enclosure like this. I mean, I have a Timor python that has gotten pretty aggressive lately, and I can't get him out of his cage anymore. It's he just he holds on to these branches with a death grip, and he gets pretty aggressive pretty quickly, or defensive, I should say. In his mind, I'm the one that's being aggressive.
So the question then is, right, is that, and you can use something like a shift box, right? People use shift boxes and they go, oh, I'll use a shift box because it's venomous. You can use shift boxes for nervous snakes.
Mm.
If you've got a snake that's nervous, your shift box is a great system to use, right?
Can you explain to me what that is?
So a shift box is basically like a hide box that you can remove and you can close off, right?
Okay.
So the animal goes into it, right? And then you can screw the lid on it and you can literally take it out. You can clean the whole enclosure, right? And then the animal just sits inside that shift box, right? While you're cleaning the enclosure, you're doing water, you're putting food in, you're doing all the stuff that you might want to do. You want to change over the vegetation, you want to remove a shed, any of that sort of stuff. The snake sits within it, and it's perfectly safe to do it now. So it's something that you tend to use in venomous keeping, but we also use it for nervous species as well that don't like being handled.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can and when the animal's outside of that shift box, you can take that shift box out, you can clean inside the shift box. So you're not left with something that's unsanitary or anything like that as well. Okay.
Mm.
Really, really simple sort of solution, really simple system to use. And you'll find that the animals are very comfortable in going in and out of them. So, that might be an option for your Timor python. You have a look, oh yeah, the Timor python's hidden away inside his hide box. Put the lid on the hide box, clean out the enclosure, do everything you need to do. You can get the snake out of the hide box if you need to, but then you're getting the snake out of a hide box as opposed to getting it out from being wrapped around branches and all the rest of it. So again, something is probably a little bit less traumatic for the snake to do as well.
Yeah, it's I mean, talk about a nervous, shy snake that doesn't want to be handled. That's basically the description of a Timor python. It's
Mhm.
I can get my female out. It's wild, man. I can get my female out on a hook
Yep.
and without her uh urinating everywhere and just letting loose. But as soon as I touch her, just one touch, I've tried to really ease into the interactions with her, and as soon as you touch her, she just opens up and dumps urates all over the place. They're
So
a special animal.
whereabouts in the room is she?
She is, so she's over here. She's behind my camera, but she's on an upper enclosure.
Bring the snake down a level.
Really?
Mhm. So you tend to find animals that are a little bit more nervous. They tend to be in the higher enclosures, right? They seem to, because they're always above you and all the rest of it, they're always striking down at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're always feeling like they're more nervous. You're trying to pull them out, and you're trying to bring them down. And see, a lot of pythons, when they're nervous, they go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's nervous. It's trying to go up. So all it's doing is trying to go up. You're pulling it down. So you're making the animal feel more and more nervous. All
Mm-hmm.
right. If you bring the animal down as you walk past those enclosures and stuff like that, when you go into the room, the animal gets more habituated to your presence. It's less likely for the animal to get stressed when it sees you, and less likely to have that nervous response. So you want to have a nervous animal, you have them up nice and high. Um, Alternatively, too, right? If you've got tall enclosures or you've got high enclosures, that can be good for arboreal species that are a little bit stressy. Give them that high advantage point in the room. They might be a little bit more comfortable for that because they're used to being up high as opposed to being down on a low enclosure.
Hmm.
So moving stuff around the room can make a big difference as well.
So what else can you tell me about feeding, especially for, like the pythons and boas, which is primarily what I keep. Now with black-headed pythons though, I often hear, and it's often a topic of discussion, that a lot of people feed those more like colubrids because they feed them smaller meals more often. Is that has that been your experience with black-headed pythons, or do you feed them?
Exactly the same. I feed them exactly the same as an olive python.
Interesting. Okay.
So good sized meals, um, relatively infrequently as adults. As young animals, yeah, they like their food. They grow very, very quickly. They get a lot of size on them very fast. And they're a big snake. They're a big bodied snake as well. It depends on where the black-headed python is from. Blackheads from Eastern Australia are much larger and more robust than the Pilbara animals, which are stark black and white things. You guys call them West Australian blackheads over there. Um, and same thing with Weimas. Realistically, blackheads are probably two species. There's probably two species of blackheaded python. You've got an eastern one and a western one. And then same thing with Weimas. There's probably three species of
Wow.
snakes currently lumped within Weimas. You've got the Brigalow Weimas, which are sort of you start to get them about 200 kilometres west of where I am. And they go through Queensland into South Australia, and they can get up to 2.7 metres long, 2.8 metres long, and as thick as your forearm. They end up being pretty big snakes. Then you got things like Ulurus and Tanamais that are much smaller. And then you got the WA ones as well. You got the southern WAs and the northern WAs, the Samphire Roadhouse type animals, which are got bright orange heads and really nice bands on them. Then you got the southwestern Womas that basically go from Shark Bay down to outskirts of Perth through to Kalgoorlie. So there are probably something else that's a little bit different as well, like a different subspecies, I suppose, but currently not recognised as being distinct. So we'll see what happens with that fleet Aspidites book that's happening at some point in time. So yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's Lucas is. I know he's working hard on that.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
it'll be a good one. I know that they're such a different snake, they're, as far as pythons go, they just kind of it feels like they break the mold in so many ways. And I know a friend of mine, Shira, sent a video of a Woma python that she had gotten, and it was rubbing around on stuff that's in its enclosure, and I'm like, oh man, this doesn't look good. Like it looks like it has mites or something. There's some irritation there, right? And we asked
On a
Lucas,
big,
and he's
big
like,
trough sweep.
yeah, we asked Lucas, and he's like, yeah, that's kind of a thing that womas do, where it's rubbing. It looked like a cat rubbing on stuff. It was so weird.
When a cat's scent glanding on something, like they stick their head and they just like rub it sort of almost upside down, sort of semi-rolled over on their side, and they'll sort of move around the enclosure like that, sort of scratching at things. And when they're trying to dig if you put them on sand and they're trying to dig, they'll actually do like a J sort of, they'll hook their neck in a bit of a funny way, and they'll drag back sections trying to
Wow.
dig, and so they actively dig themselves. It's interesting, right? Like they used to be thought as being, because of their morphology, that people used to think they were like a basal form of python, but they're really not. They're sort of quite an advanced species, I suppose. They're quite a young group of
Really?
pythons that's out there. Yeah, and they do actually have pits as well. That's the other thing that people don't talk about, them having pits, heat sensitive pits like um, other pythons, but they do actually have them. They just don't have labial pits. They've got a rostral pit that sits behind the rostral scale. And if you actually look at a black-headed python or a woma, and you sort of look at their head, and the head comes back up, you can actually see the pit underneath. But the scale comes down and covers most of it, because when the sand or anything like that, then they're going into their burrows or anything like that, that sand would fill up those pits. So they've got the scale projection comes down over the top and actually keeps it clear, so they don't get filled up with shit, so they can actually
Wow.
use their pit. And that's why the other thing you'll see blackheads and womas do is they'll stick their head up, sort of almost cobra-esque in fashion, or like when a snake, you see ball pythons and stuff like that, where they periscope, they stick their head up. You'll often see that with blackheads and womas, and they'll stick their head back and they'll roll it back a little bit, so they're actually projecting the heat out, so they can breed the environment better.
Wow. Yeah, seeing that Woma roll around, it's like, man, if one of my snakes was doing that, I'd think, all right, we got to get this
It
thing
looks
out
like
of
it's
here.
got looks like it's got Stargazer or something like that.
Yeah, it's gonna die.
Yeah,
Yeah,
quarantine that
it's
shit.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're such weird little snakes. And they got cute little faces, so that, but man, their feed response is I did an episode with Derek Roddy, and man, he had one, I think, wrap his hook, and so he just put the snake back in the cage with kind of the hook sitting out, and I think like 40 minutes goes by or something, and all of a sudden the hook drops, like it held it for so long.
They're pretty polite. And the thing is, too, right? People often keep them in snake rooms, right, with other snakes. So they're just always on food, right? Because their
Oh
main
yeah.
diet in the wild is snakes. Can you imagine if you
Wow.
kept a carpet python in a room full of rats and mice and
That's
birds?
such a good point.
You
Yeah.
know, people will go, "Oh, these things are bitey." Well, no, you're keeping them around their food all the time.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's like we were raising rabbits, and the excess rabbit food that was coming out of the cages was bringing rats in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got diamond pythons, and I have a male that I'm keeping outside, and
Yeah,
he was rubbing and pushing, trying to get out of the enclosure. And just, it's got mesh on the cage, and he
mm-hmm.
really took quite a few scales off the top of his head. It's super depressing.
Yeah,
I think it's gotten better now. But what I had to do is control I had to get rid of the rabbits and control the rat population around the house,
yeah.
because, and that seems to have helped a lot. But like you said, he had to have been keyed up every night, with them moving around the house and running around outside. I'm sure that smell was coming towards him, and he just wanted to get out and feed.
So that's what he's designed to do. Um, and the thing is too, right? If they're around their food, they'll eat when they can, right? Because they don't know when their next meal's coming, right? So they'll eat today, and then if you give them the opportunity to eat in 4 days' time, then they'll probably eat again. And this is where, you do have issues with longevity, right? Because what ends up happening is that you get these animals that get these huge fat deposits because all they're doing is eating, right? They're eating and they're sitting, they're eating, they're sitting, they're eating, they're sitting, they're eating, they're sitting. Because the cages that they're being kept in aren't real conducive to a lot of movement. They're not moving around the place much. They're not having to hunt. They're not they're not evading predators. They don't have to do much, and because they don't have to do much, they don't do much. And so suddenly they're just sitting there getting fat. Right? It's interesting. The other thing is that it's like the use of UV light in reptiles, right? And some people are like, no, you don't need UV light for this, and you don't need UV light for that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you do. Does it hurt providing it to them? And that's the question I ask people. Does it hurt? And if the answer is yes, then how are you producing it? How are you providing UV light? Are you providing the appropriate UV light? Now, if you're not providing any shaded areas or any areas away from the UV light, then the animals don't have a choice to get away from the UV, right? It's just like imagine if you heated the whole enclosure and you didn't give the animal a chance to cool down anywhere, and then wondered why the animal cooked. Well, it cooked because you didn't give it a chance you didn't give it anywhere it can cool down. The animals will regulate themselves if they have the opportunity to be able to regulate. But not providing something because they may not need it isn't necessarily the best move. It might be provided. If they choose not to use it, then it doesn't matter. They've chosen not to use it. There has been some studies with regards to like bone density in corn snakes and a few other bits and pieces where the bone densities in the corn snakes is considerably higher with animals that were exposed to UV light versus animals that weren't exposed to UV. There's evidence to show that UVA increases serotonin levels in other squamates. So there's no reason to suggest that may not be the case. That wouldn't be the case in other snakes. If the snakes are producing serotonin and the snakes are producing that's the drug that makes you feel happy, right? If the animals they're producing serotonin and they're feeling content. If they're feeling content, they're less likely to get maladaptation. So if it's an animal that you're trying to bring into captivity that may be a wild-caught animal that's been exposed to UV light and then something doesn't have UV light anymore, then that could be an issue. The other part is that many reptiles actually see in the UV spectrum. So not being able to see UV light means they may not be able to see in their normal color range as to what they have now. Can you imagine if you didn't see reds or greens or blues? It would confuse the hell out of you.
Yeah.
Right? And so the question then is are we doing the right thing by not providing UV light? It's not that it doesn't mean the animal survives. Yeah, the animal might survive. Does it thrive? And that's the next question to ask. So,
yeah, lighting has been a topic on this podcast a couple good times, and I just recently had on Thomas Griffiths, and we did almost a 5-hour episode on lighting and husbandry and the ethics of keeping and all that, and it's like he says, do they we need to get away from asking do they need it. Because what does a human need to survive? You could keep a human alive in a box. As horrible as it is to say that, it's true.
you can feed them nothing but McDonald's as well.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like you could literally feed them nothing but McDonald's. Would they survive? 100%.
Yeah.
May not be real good for them, but they'll survive at least for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, so I've been using UV with all my snakes. All my cages are designed to accept UV lights. Exoterra sponsors this podcast, and they're kind of really pushing the science and trying to make the absolute best UVB lighting possible. And and they're trying to work with the pun intended, the brightest people out there, to design these bulbs and actually, look at these lights so that way you can give your animal the best thing possible, whether or not they need it. Needs a strong word, but if you could enhance their life and make it better, and why not?
Well, it's interesting you say that, right? So, shameless plug, right? Our Australasian Leopard book here.
You're here
First
to
book
plug
that
books, buddy.
I'm here to plug books, right? But I'm still going to do it anyway, right? So, Australasian Leopard book, right? It's got Ferguson zones in there. We put the Ferguson zones in for every species of snake in that book, right? So not only did we recommend temperatures and cage sizes and feeding rates and food types and all the rest of it, just like everything else in temperature ranges, here's the Ferguson zones that we recommend for these species, right? Every husbandry book that we work on moving forward will have Ferguson zone recommendations in it for the species that we're talking about.
Wow.
Now, does that mean that they might get tweaked? Yeah, 100%. We tweak things as we get better, as we learn more, right? But you need a starting point. Now, we've based the Ferguson zone recommendations on the ecology of those species in the wild and the locations that those animals sit in, right? And so, there's this great paper, Baines et al., that looks at Ferguson zone recommendations for about 200 species of commonly kept reptiles and amphibians. So we just added another 60 there, right? We're working on another project at the moment that's got that's going to cover about 20 species. Those 20 species will all have Ferguson zone recommendations in it as well. When we work on another project, they'll all have Ferguson zones in them as well, because this is the thing. It's another tool that we can help guide people with in regards to providing that information. There's a big difference between, say, a book and something like on the internet, right? The internet, for the most part, is not peer reviewed. Okay, now not all books are peer reviewed either, but certainly.
Wait a minute, YouTubers aren't peer reviewed?
Yeah, 100%. Believe it or not, right?
Because I just found out I can drink lemon water and it's going to add years to my life.
Yeah, amazing, man. Yeah, 100%. Right. But this is what we're saying, right? So don't get me wrong. There's amazing stuff on the internet. But there's also a lot of shit out there as well, and it's a matter of sort of sorting the shit from the clay. And generally speaking, a book that's published by someone like a different Chimera or Eco Publishing or something like that is generally going to be of pretty good quality right from the start. Okay, when was the last time you picked up a book from Eco or Chimera and gone, oh yeah, that was a load of shit? That's not the case, right? Because the people that write those books have been around for a very long time. They know what they're doing. They know what they're writing about. They produce good quality publication. And it's a good starting point for a lot of things. So that from our point of view, so that's sort of how we kicked off in regards to the writing side of things. I initially got asked to write a book on the husbandry of frogs, and then husbandry of venomous snakes as well. So two completely different things as part of a series of books that was produced in there. We wrote them in 2010, which is 15 years ago now, and they came out as a series, along with some guys that did a mate of mine who did Python book, a turtle book, and then there was another guy who did the lizards as well. And so we had this amazing set of books on the husbandry and ecology of Australian reptiles and amphibians that we put out. And then slowly but surely we've been going through and updating and updating those things. But then the other side of it for us is we're also mad field herpers as well. So we wrote the Naturalist Guide to the Snakes of Australia, the Frogs of Australia, Lizards of Australia. I wrote a Dangerous Creatures book as well, because apparently everything in Australia wants to kill people.
Sounds like Florida.
Realistically, the most dangerous thing here is our politicians. No different.
Sounds like America.
No different to over there either. We've got an issue with one of your politicians at the moment that's made life a bit difficult for us to send books to the States these days. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Anyway, we'll stay away from politics as much as possible, I think.
Sure.
And yeah, so the other thing that we did is we actually produced a field guide to the snakes of Australia as well. My wife, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, she's had a family emergency, I suppose, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Um, so regret, apologies from her, but she actually wrote the field guide to the snakes of Australia with myself as the co-author on that. So that's a pretty impressive publication that sort of almost when it was completely finished, Princeton University got a look at the manuscript and said, we'd really like to produce that ourselves. So Princeton University has picked that one up and they're selling it as well as a Princeton release. So there's an Australian release of the book, and a Princeton University version, and the Princeton version is available in the US, which is amazing because it means that you guys have got this amazing book on Australian snakes at a
Yeah.
really good price point in the US. So yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, that's on my list. I feel like the the it's almost like there's a war on books right now. And but it's not being waged by individuals but rather social media as a tool that we use and as a tool for distraction. I feel like for me personally, it has gotten so much harder to read books as time has gone on. And I wish I could relearn the behavior of reading
Mhm.
because I find myself so incredibly distracted now that it's so hard to read books.
Mhm.
And I do the majority I love audiobooks because I can put them on in the car, right? And I can't distract myself there. I'm distracting myself with an audiobook. It's I sit down and I'll read maybe a page or two, and by the time I get to the second or third page, I realize that I am thinking about 40 other things as I'm reading. Like I'm reading the words, but I'm not thinking about what I'm reading. I'm not ingesting it. I'm so distracted.
Now,
Uh,
there's a couple of different tools you can use, right? So there's a couple of apps that if you were to load a PDF into that, it will actually read it for you. Okay, and then you can change the speed time on that. So it's something that I use if I'm wanting to digest a lot of, because I'm time poor like everybody else. If I'm wanting to read some scientific papers or something like that, well, what I'll often do is I'll load that up and I'll listen to the scientific paper as I'm driving to work. Right. So I've got 45 minutes. I'll listen to it at usually at 1.4 times speed.
yeah,
Um, and I'll just sit there and I'll listen to that while I'm driving to work. And, a bit like you say, distracting yourself. And then if there's something that I need to go back and have another listen to or something like that, or it's a particularly technical publication, then I might drop the read speed back down to 1.2 or 1.1 or even at normal speed to see how I go with regards to the ingestion of that information, particularly if it's something like on phylogenetics or something like that, which is a bit of a hard read for me or something like that to read. So, but general ecology papers or something like that, fairly easy to listen to on a fairly high speed. Um, you can actually take some of those things now, and some documents you can pick up and look at those from you might be able to get a digital version. You can get a digital version, great. Um, that can help you. But generally speaking, a lot of reptile books aren't something that you read cover to cover anyway. You
mm,
know, people that tell me that they read this cover to cover, I read that cover to cover, I'm like, why? That's not the way that book is designed. It's designed for you to read maybe a chapter at a time with you're doing a deep dive into reptile lighting, or you're doing a deep dive into nutrition, or a deep dive into uh, ailments or reproduction or a particular species. You'll read through the species account, and the associated pieces of information. I can see someone reading a chapter here and there, but like the books behind me and all the rest of it, yeah, I've read most of the book, but I didn't read them all at once. I didn't read them. I didn't go, all right, okay, I'm going to read this like a storybook or a chapter book. I'm going to read parts of the book as they relate to what I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, it's like the more complete carpet python. I got that and I started reading it from cover to cover, and then I'm like, well, I really want to read about diamond pythons right now, so I skipped ahead and I read about diamond pythons, and then you know what, I want to read about jungles again. So let me read about jungle carpets, and I go back in the book, and then recently I did a maternal incubation discussion podcast episode, so I read the chapter on maternal incubation, and then it is I wish we could get more books in digital format. That way you could, because so many people are doing that now, where they'll get a digital book and they feed it into AI, and then a friend of mine was listening to, I think, a book on poker or something like that, but he had Snoop Dogg reading it to him, in AI, and it's it's so weird.
Well, I
It's
had I've got that same app, right? Speakify is the app, and I for a laugh I was listening to a publication on the nomenclature and taxonomy of Canis lupus dingo, and listening to Snoop Dogg talk about phylogenetics and nomenclature is a very interesting sort of feat. I don't think Snoop Dogg has ever said Canis lupus dingo at any time in his life. So so that was a bit different, that's for sure.
Do you think of that's the, with people with their busy lives, and with the fairly recent introduction of social media, and people really just wasting, it's crazy, like so much of my day is wasted. There's so much I have to get done, but I end up inevitably wasting time on social media. Do you think that tools like
Yeah.
that are the future of books? These
And
things that can sort of digest
it's an
it and read it
interesting
back to you.
it's an interesting question, isn't it? Right? Like I would never want to release one of my publications as an ebook, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I don't want to release it as an ebook is completely different, probably realistically, to what other people have probably got in their mind, right? I don't even care that if somebody rips off an ebook, right? What I'm worried about is someone gets my book and then they feed it into an AI program, right? And then they go change everything from that refers to in this publication as a lapid to Python, right?
Mm.
And they put it into ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatever is the AI program is today, and then they produce this husbandry guide on keeping snakes that looks close but isn't actually.
Yeah.
That's the part that worries me, and we're starting to see that now already, right? So you go onto Amazon and you see the most important guide to keeping fucking some weird species that not many people work with, and it's an AI. It's an AI publication because it's written by somebody nobody's ever heard of.
Mm.
Um, the capturing and the authorship doesn't make any sense, and then half the time the photo there is of a different species or a different family or a different genus or whatever it might be. Um, so at the moment, there's all these tells, and people laugh about it and go, "Oh, ha 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 ha!" Who would fall for that? Well, the general public
Yeah.
might. In 6 months' time, you look at the rate of what AI was 18 months ago, what it is 12 months ago, to what it is today. The rate of change and the how much it is improved in such a short period of time, it scares the shit out of me as to what it's going to be in 12 months.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I
12
don't think you're
months.
going to be in 12 months' time in regards to imagery. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell the difference between almost an AI generated image and an image taken by a photographer.
We're
And
already there. I
there's
mean,
somebody
we're
that's got 30,000 images sitting in their image library. It's cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to take over the years, going across Australia and some parts of the world, pacing down herps to photograph.
Mhm.
And you can go, right, draw me an image, draw me a photograph of this species doing this. and it produces it. It probably has an extra digit or, a weird aberration in its pattern or escalation and all the rest of it at the moment, but not for too much longer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird it's such a weird thing, and it's getting better every day. I mean, 6 months, I think, it's, there's already images that you see and you're like, is that real? I don't know what I'm looking at. And even the video, which the video used to have so many telltale things that would give it away. And now you see video of somebody interacting with an animal, and it takes you a minute to be like, that can't be real. Cause but you have to find the thing that gives it away. So yeah, who knows where it's going to be in just 6 months.
Yeah. Will you know if that person's actually free handling something, or are they just not holding anything at all, but it's an AI fake of someone holding a black mamba or a
Yeah.
snarlback
Yeah.
rattlesnake or whatever it might be. You know,
How,
um,
speaking of free handling, how do you feel about free handling?
um, it has its place outside of the internet, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I don't. I certainly don't do it these days. I, I'm never going to say that I haven't free handled in the past. It's something that I have done previously, many, many, many years ago. When I say many years ago, over 20 years ago, I free handled various bits and pieces. Not for the, not because I was trying to make out that I was some special person or anything like that. It was because I was in my 20s and I thought I was indestructible and I did stupid shit. You know,
Yeah.
I can look back at it now and say that I was doing stupid shit back then. But, in 2005, I almost died from a medically insignificant species of snake that I was handling at the time,
Hmm.
because I went into anaphylactic shock after a bite.
What kind of
So
snake was it?
it was from a thing called a swamp snake. So it's a Hemiaspis signata. It's a little lapid. It was a very large specimen. It was the first one I ever came across before. So it's not like I'd had prior exposure to its venom or anything like that before. Got bitten on the finger and went into anaphylaxis within in 30 minutes of the bite. And it was through dumb luck that I survived.
Wow. Did you have an
So
EpiPen, or like how did you treat it?
uh, I took some Phenergan, which is a fairly strong antihistamine. That's all I had with me. Um, so I'd taken the Phenergan, and I just box breathed for, for 2 hours basically, and effectively meditated through that time, and then calmed myself to a point where I sort of lowered my need for as much oxygen as possible without passing out. My airway didn't completely constrict, and so I still was being able to take enough oxygen in at the time to be able to remain conscious. But it was borderline. We were hundreds of k's from medical help at the time, and we were racing to get to medical help at the time. So, and by the time we sort of got close to the hospital or getting close to the hospital, I'd sort of got through the worst of it. And I was breathing better at that point and all the rest of them. We said, no point in going to the hospital now. I'm feeling better. Let's go off and go snaking. So we, so we kept snaking. So, you know,
That's so
um,
crazy.
and then, when I got back after that trip and all the rest of it, I was talking to uh, a friend of mine who was a medical doctor, and he said, "Look, you probably need to go and talk to someone from the venom unit." So I spoke to the director of the Australian venom unit at the time, and they were like, "No, mate, you're probably allergic. So you need to go get yourself an EpiPen and consider whether or not working with venomous snakes is something that you want to continue to do." Well, that wasn't an option for me. I'm always going to work with venomous snakes, so EpiPen it is, and change my handling style from being fairly nonchalant to being um, rigorously careful,
Mm.
to the point where a lot of my mates at the time and still are mates, were giving me shit about it, going, "Oh, you're scared of this, or you're scared of that, or you've gone from being pretty relaxed to somebody who's very, very cautious in regards to what they do." But at the end of the day, right? no one wants to die from being bitten by a snake. It's a pretty horrible way to go. So,
Yeah.
and look, I see people freehandle all the time. If they're doing it for views or whatever, I don't really see them as part of the venomous community these days. I see them as much as the venomous community is uh, a carnival sideshow shooting gallery is to the firearm industry, right?
Mm,
It's just a sideshow. It's just a thing to the side. People are always going to do stupid shit. You want to
yeah.
include them as part of who you are, you know? No, just let them off the side, let them go there where they want to be.
Yeah, I've kind of changed my opinion on free handling to a certain extent, because I kind of had this very black and white view on it, and then I had Ross McGibbon on, and he kind of talked about free handling, but not doing it for likes and views,
Hmm?
and it was very much, it wasn't, oh, there's a taipan, let's free handle it. It was, there's a taipan, and man, its disposition is really different from a lot of the other ones, and it's very slow, it's very calm, and after handling it for X amount of time, it was something. It's not like, I feel like a lot of the people that do it for the views or likes are, I am going to free handle X, Y, or Z animal, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to record it, and I'm going to put the video out, and it'll get the reaction that it'll get. Whereas I feel like maybe, maybe it's not something that I would ever do, but if there's somebody that specializes in these animals and all that, who am I to judge? It's, I've ridden on motorcycles, which is exponentially more dangerous than, I've had numerous motorcycles, and it's so dangerous in comparison to driving in a car, but it's not somebody else's decision. That was my decision, and kind of like you with free handling venomous snakes, it's not something I do anymore, right? Because I did that when I did think I was invincible, and maybe my life wasn't as important as it is now. Now that I have kids and a wife and everything
Well,
else.
I'll ask you a slightly different question, right? And it's interesting. I often get asked about free handling and what my things are, and my thoughts are on it. And the question I have is simply this: do you get the same concern if somebody is free handling, say, an Eastern Diamondback, as if somebody is holding a 14-foot Burmese python around their neck?
Mm,
Now, if the answer is no, right, then my answer to you is simply this: is that Burmese python could get around that person's neck and could have them unconscious within 20 seconds, dead within 2 minutes. 2 minutes, right? And we wouldn't, generally speaking, as a community, we wouldn't think it would be too unusual for people to work with a large constrictor by themselves, right? And we go, oh well, Joe Bloggs, he knows what he's doing. Or Jane Bloggs, she knows what she's doing. They're not going to get hurt. They'll be okay. They can work with that large scrub python. They can work with that Burmese. They can work with that Afrock. They can work with that Ritic. People don't see that as free handling, right? If somebody picks up a copperhead and is holding a copperhead in their hands, or a rattlesnake in their hands, or a cobra in their hands, or something, or they're putting their hand on the back of a cobra or something like that. The sky's going to fall in. Right? The sky isn't going to fall in, but handling constrictors in a poor manner is just as dangerous. Someone picking up an Asian water monitor and having it walking around sitting on their shoulder at a reptile show is dangerous too. There's danger in all of these things, if people aren't careful with what they're doing. So my argument back is simply this: is that consider your audience, consider why you're doing it, and if the answer is because you want to look like a this cool person because you're free handling something, well, the people that you're not going to impress anyone that's been doing it for a long time, because anyone's been doing it for a long time, seen it all before, and they're not impressed, right? If anything, you're probably going to have people that have been around for a long time going, "What a dickhead," right? That's what people are thinking. If someone walks up to me and they're free handling something, I'm like, "Oh, okay, fair enough. Well, hope he knows what he's doing." It doesn't scare me, but it doesn't make me think this guy is this amazing person or something like that either. I've got some mates that don't free handle. I've got other mates that do. One mate in particular who he free handles snakes when nobody else is around, because that's just the way he handles snakes, right? And he doesn't change his style if somebody happens to walk into the room. He just does. That's how he's always done it. That's how he always is. Um, is it the smartest way to handle? Maybe not. But at the end of the day, right, he's been doing it for at least 3 decades that I've known. Um, yeah, he's been bitten by things, and he's had some pretty serious bites and all the rest of it. But at the same time, he doesn't make a big deal of it. He's not posting. He's not going out there and posting a shitload of photos up there to cause trouble or anything like that. When he posts photos, he usually posts photos of the animals that he's seeing, but he's not. There's no photos of him holding any of this sort of stuff.
Hmm.
So it's an interesting thing, and I did listen to that episode with Ross, and you know I think Ross's comments are completely justified. At the end of the day, he felt like he was at one with the animal at the time, and good on him. If that's what floats his boat, good on him. I mean, Ross is a really nice guy. He's been around a long time, knows what he's doing. He's a cool bloke, and you know, there's a lot more dangerous things out there. And as you say, it could be you know crossing the street. He could be riding a motorbike. Could be smoking cigarettes, and we sell those things in the local service station down the road.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things
Yeah,
out there can kill you.
it's my conversation with him really definitely changed my perspective, and I think that even in what you just said is another perspective altering statement. Just that the fact that it does, I think it elicits such a response when you see it on social media, where you're like, oh my God, that's so insane. This guy is so crazy for doing this. And, like all those thoughts go through your mind. But then, I do, you see a guy with a huge retic on his shoulders, and I'm just like, oh, that's awesome. Look at the size of that snake. That's so cool. So yeah, it's weird how we kind of break things up in our minds based off of our own experiences, and then kind of make up our mind on what's responsible and irresponsible.
So the question I've got to you is simply to try. You talk about that large constrictor that you've seen on the person's shoulder. How long does it take you to die when you don't have access to oxygen?
Oh man, not long.
Minutes.
Yeah,
Talking
especially
minutes,
when
right?
you're panicking and your heart rate goes through the roof.
We're talking minutes, right? Okay. And
Yeah.
when you see someone in UFC or fighting or something like that, and they get a rear naked choke, and they patch someone out, right? They're unconscious in seconds, right? Now, you're talking before about Derek Roddy and that black-headed python and that snake hook, right? And it held on for 45 minutes or whatever, however long. So if you get a retic and a feeding response that happens to grab somebody and gets around their neck, they're out in seconds. That snake could be holding on for 10 minutes. That person is dead,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, if, let's say, someone's picked up a large king cobra or something like that, and the worst happens and the person gets bitten, they're probably not going to be dead in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. It's such a different, it's just a different perspective, and I think it's got to do with the fact that I don't have venomous, and I think a lot of people don't have venomous, so when they see these things, it just elicits such a different response.
And for the most part, right, it's not the venomous community that are getting up in arms about free handling.
Mm.
Don't get me wrong, there certainly are some. Right? There are some people that are very anti free handling, and they are from the venomous community. And some of those people I regard as friends, and some of those people are very experienced. And I don't disagree with it. And I think there's a time and a place for it. And I don't think social media is the place for, for free handling.
Yeah.
At the same time, too, right? I'm not going to be hypocritical and say that somebody should never do it. If that's what you want to do, and that's how you're a grown adult, you can make your own decision. I just don't want your decisions to affect me.
Yeah.
What I'm much more pissed off about is people keeping venomous in enclosures that aren't suitable, right?
Mm.
People that aren't keeping venomous in an appropriate way. That is much more detrimental to keeping your reptiles. The way that guy, dickhead in South Carolina or North Carolina, wherever he was, he had one guy that had um, a zebra spitting cobra escape, and was
Mm.
I think it was Raleigh, North Carolina, or whatever it was. I think it was the town he was in. And they had poppers there and all sorts of things, and blue traps trying to catch the poor little zebra spitter that had been kept out because the guy kept it in a shitty enclosure, being a lunchbox, in a
Ugh.
shitty room that had holes in it and all the rest of it. And it's like, well, dude, that's not good.
Yeah.
That's really, really fucking bad. And then, you know, some dickhead decides that it's a good idea to try and handle an inland taipan in a really inappropriate way. And then wonders why, he gets a bite from that inland taipan and then jumps all over social media about it. And at the end of the day, right, those people do stupid shit. Those stupid things have affected other people's freedoms for keeping venomous animals, right? That's the
Hmm.
sort of stuff that pisses me off, not some guy that's pre-handled a cobra sometime at some point in time and decided to post a picture of it.
Yeah, when it ends up damaging the animals and harming the animals, and that's when it really gets bad. I guess the other thing is too is when somebody gets bitten, it can potentially bring legislative measures down on the rest of the hobby, and I know that that's a big argument from a lot of the people that are very much against free handling, is that it's something that you can avoid. It's irresponsible, and then it brings legislation down on the rest of us that are keeping responsibly. And I can very much see that side of the argument as well.
The other side of that too, that's not restricted to venomous keeping. That's just pork keeping in general,
Yeah.
right? You know, there's organisations out there that don't want to see people keeping reptiles. Okay, and so any fuel for that fire that we can provide them, whether we're providing the keeping of animals in poor conditions, poor freighting of animals. You know, as you were talking before about doom scrolling and stuff like that on social media, I saw someone open up a bag, and when he opened up the bag, there was mites in the bag. Sitting there thinking to
Ugh.
myself, wait, what the fuck? Why are you opening, for starters, why are you opening that bag in like a snake room? Right? Like, that's just nuts to me. And now you just brought like the devil in your snake. I hate mites. You've brought mites into your snake room because you're doing some video with these bloody things, and you've brought mites in. So from one side, really poor form in regards to pulling the animal out where you're pulling it out, but then also really poor form on the seller's behalf. Like, I would feel absolutely shocked if I'd ever sent animals out that had mites on them. I'd be like, what the fuck? That's terrible. You know, we should be doing
Yeah.
better. And then also too, like, how we freight animals is important as well. I we don't have the same issue that you guys have over there with regards to cold weather, but we certainly have issues with hot weather over here when it comes to freighting. And so, we're not putting heat packs and stuff like that in with our animals when we're shipping them. But we certainly ship them in a manner is that deals with thermal issues in regards to heat and stuff like that. We don't want to cook any of our animals and stuff like that. The amount of times that I've had animals freighted to me in ways that I would never freight an animal, albeit whether the the animals aren't double bagged properly, or the bags are mislabeled, or what. Like it's not good. It's
Mm.
not hard to do things the right way, and people should do things the right way.
Do you guys ship venomous snakes? Does that? Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, we ship animals like all the time, all the
Wow.
time. Only within Australia, we don't. You can't send animals basically outside of Australia.
Sure.
Um, so institutions, some certain institutions can, but almost zero movement of live snakes out of Australia. But certainly animals around this, from state to state, even within big states, from north to south and stuff like that. We'll also make stuff on planes and stuff. So the
Okay.
animals will be double bagged into a locked container that's thermally insulated, appropriately labelled, labelling on the outside, P attached to the outside, all those sorts of things, and then goes through the appropriate measures in regards to protocols and yeah, ship them as you ship them.
Wow. Now, something I want to ask you about, kind of going back to the whole feeding issue, is with diamond pythons, and kind of carpets in general. A lot of them in captivity here in America are on the smaller side in comparison to some of the snakes I see getting pulled out of walls and roofs and toilets and things like that over there in Australia. Or even just some of the images of some of the ones that are, just roaming around outside. They look like heavy bodied, large snakes in a lot of cases where you're looking at this. And my question, so initially I was like, are we underfeeding in captivity here in America? Is it just the genetics that we have, or are these animals, and somebody brought this up to me. They put this kind of thought into my brain, was, are these carpet pythons that are living around humans, therefore there's trash, so there's more rats and, varmint that are available, more prey items. So are carpet pythons that are in captivity smaller, and does that mean that they're healthier, or are we, are the ones that are in these videos, are they kind of just jacked and huge because of what they're consuming?
Um, all right. So I suppose there's a couple of different questions to what you sort of spoke about there.
There's
Um,
10 questions in there.
yeah, yeah. So you've got through a few things there. I'm just flicking through the complete carpet python at the moment, um, trying to find a particular image um, of a carpet python that's in there. But there's a carpet python, certainly in the first edition. I'm not sure if it's in the second edition. That Adam Elliott and myself came across. That was a bit of a distance away from any cities or anything like that. That animal was 10 foot 9 inches, right? So it was a wild
Wow.
carpet. It was 10 foot 9 inches. It had a head on it, sort of like that round. It was a huge, big old male
Wow.
carpet. It had had a meal. Um, it was probably eaten either a paddy melon or which is like the size of maybe 3 times the size of a rabbit, I suppose, a small macropod, or it might have been a brush turkey. It was a bit hard to sort of determine which one it was. Um, but this carpet python to this day is still the largest carpet python I've ever seen. Right.
Wow.
I've caught multiple carpets around the 9.5 foot mark. Um, all have been large males. All have had big heads on them, and all the rest of it. All of the large carpet pythons that I've seen in captivity haven't had big heads on them, right? So what that tells me is that they're probably animals that have grown very slowly over a long time, that have a lot of muscle mass to them, whereas they don't have a huge amount of fat on them. So there's a lot of lean. They're eating a lot of lean meals, lean muscle, and all the rest of it. So they're probably eating a little bit less, and they're eating better quality diet. Um, So that's probably two things. They're also spending a lot more time out in the sun, so they've got access to UV light, and so they've got different bone densities. They've got thicker skin. The scales feel different. Like if you feel your diamond python when it's been outside and been outside for months, they feel completely different to the diamond pythons that are sitting inside the house. Right, a captive snake inside a house is sort of soft for the touch. Right, if you feel that diamond python that you've got outside, it'll feel a little bit harder, and it's a little bit more rigid, and the muscles feel a little bit more dense than the animals that are in captivity that almost feel a little bit spongy. Um, so I think that makes a significant difference. Genetics obviously plays a part in it as well. Right? If you look in people, you've got races of people from Central Africa that are very small in stature. Right, doesn't matter how much food you feed them, they're not going to grow taller.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the genetics though obviously do play a part in regards to how big a particular animal can get. And the animals that you have in the US are of a fairly small gene pool for the most part, with the
Mm-hmm.
exception of things like your Papillon carpets, which obviously you can import via Indonesia. Yeah, you guys get morphs and stuff like that, obviously through the amazing portals that seem to pop up via Europe and all the rest of it, where animals disappear from Australia and then they suddenly appear overseas, right? So it's not to say that there isn't any new blood ever coming across, but most of it isn't large captive snakes. It isn't large wild pythons, that's for sure. Um, so to answer your question, I think they are growing much slower. I think they are eating better. Um, and I think you're only seeing a small subset too. There's a bias. There's a visual bias to see big animals.
Mm.
Right? It's easier to see a big animal because a big animal's harder to hide than a small animal. So you tend to see more numbers of big ones. The other thing is too is that I can remember every really large carpet python I've seen. As a percentage of the amount of carpet pythons I've seen, it doesn't even rate, right?
Mm.
I've caught hundreds, thousands probably of carpet pythons between 4 and 6 feet long. I don't remember them all,
Yeah.
but I remember seeing that one that was 10'9". Do you see what I'm saying, right? So there's this
Sure.
bias
Yeah.
to it as
Yeah.
well. So you remember the one that's big. So what's the local snake to you? What do you see the most commonly?
Uh, the thing we probably see the most would be black racers.
All right. How many black races do you remember as
Oh
an
man.
individual?
I mean, yeah, we see them all the time.
You
So,
see them all the time. Do you remember the first one you ever saw then?
yeah, yeah,
You see my point.
yeah,
So you remember the ones that stand out to you, right? You don't necessarily remember the ones that don't stand out because they don't stand out for a reason. So,
yeah, yeah. It's a good point. The first one I saw, I remember, or at least the first one I interacted with was on my parents' porch when I was a kid.
mhm.
And I remember trying. I was like, "Oh, it's a black racer. It's all fine. I'm gonna get it out of here." And I remember it was cornered and it started rattling its tail around. And I was like, "Maybe I've misidentified this. Maybe this is something else," you know.
Yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
but yeah, and I remember another one that I had an interaction with was a large one for a black racer, and it had a chunk of meat taken out of its like its side, like
Okay.
it had been weed eaten or somebody had caused some severe trauma to it, and it was super docile too. It was up in a mulberry bush, and I was able to. It just came out and kind of came onto me, which made it really stand out in my mind that it was larger, it was docile, and it had an injury. So yeah, I could see, and I'm sure it's the same thing. I'm sure I'm seeing a lot of videos of carpet pythons in the wild, but the ones that stand out are the ones that are huge. Even a 7 or 8 foot carpet python is going to be pretty substantial.
Exactly right. And they do get big. right? They do get much larger than what people sort of think, right? And that's the other part that I find sort of funny is that they go, "Oh, they only get this big." I'm like, no, no. When you see a really large carpet python, they're an incredibly impressive animal. Um, and they're not all the same size in the same location either, right? I was up with a really experienced herper by the name of Rob Valenic, in Cairns, and we were out chasing some bits and pieces, and we came across a large Atherton tablelands carpet python that was about 8.5 feet, I suppose, in length, and it had a huge head on it, another
Mm.
big headed thing, right? And you don't associate carpet pythons there with being massive up on the tablelands. Usually they're small. They're smaller, the small jungle size carpet pythons, which are relatively small. Some max out about 6 feet in length, and this thing was well and truly larger than that. So, yeah,
So genetics play a huge role too, just like in with people. I mean, you can get a giant strong man and put that guy next to me, and it's going to be, we're both humans, but one is just genetically a different thing.
yeah. Well, it doesn't. I'll put it to you this way, Rob. I could eat the best diet in the world. I could do the best training in the world, right? I could have the very best, right? And so could you. I guarantee you, it doesn't matter what we do, we're never going to run as fast as Usain Bolt.
Yeah,
All right? People out there, there's certain people out there, there's certain things out there that are what they are because of their genetic makeup, right? So not everything's training, not everything is nurture, not everything is the environment. Certain things come down just to the genetics of that particular animal.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. What what can you tell me about diamond pythons? I mean, I love diamond pythons. I love talking about diamond pythons. So I
So the
mean,
first thing I'd say to you is you probably need to come out to Australia and go and see some.
yeah,
Yeah, honestly, it changes your life, right? To see something in the wild, to see the way they sit in the wild is amazing, right? Wasn't too long ago I saw diamonds in the wild at a place in southern New South Wales, and I'm sort of walking along a cliff top, and I looked across on the cliff top, looked across, and then suddenly here's this diamond python stretched out on a branch, you
mm,
know, a large diamond python uh, in dappled sunlight. Actually had a waterfall in the background as well. Like it was this amazing picture, and I took photos of it in situ, which is pretty cool. And then I sort of wandered. The first place I could sort of get down to where this animal was about 600 meters downstream. So I sort of had to rock hop my way downstream to get to a point where I could get down to the level where that animal was, and then climb back up through the stream to try and get back to where it was. And by the time I got back there, it had gone to try and get a different photo of it. But yeah, I gave it a crack. But yeah, seeing that in the wild was pretty cool. We've got diamond pythons that we keep outside here in
nice.
Brisbane. And their coloration is so much better with them being outside. They're so much happier to be outside. Know. Um, they're a different sort of a carpet python to the other ones in regards to their ecology. Um, but at the same time, too, I don't see them as different. I don't see them as a different species or anything like that. Um, I have a differing view of the nomenclature and the taxonomy of carpet pythons to say Nick and Justin. In that these animals genetically are the same for the most part for most of those animals, as opposed to being different species. They're probably better regarded as different races of the same thing.
Mm,
And those different races of the same thing have got color variations that sit within them, and they have different ecological preferences. Much like um, the blue tongue skinks from the southern part of the range differently to the blue tongue to the northern part of their range, because they are dealing with different ecologies and all the rest of it. It's the same thing you see with um, corn snakes and rat snakes and stuff like that, the way that black rat snakes behave in the northern part of the US compared to the southern part of the US is very different, right? I would imagine that the rats, the black races and stuff like that, where you are, don't hibernate. They'll go through an inactivity period through the middle of winter, but they could still be found if you really went looking for them, or you went flipping tin, or whatever it is. You'll still come across things. Whereas in the northern part of their range, where those animals would be hibernating, they are going to be hibernating. They're going to be down a hole or down a crack or under the boulders or whatever it is. So the changes in ecology. It doesn't mean they're different species. It just means they have different strategies to deal with the living where they are. And as part of those strategies, there might be a morphological change. So it might be that they've got a larger body. They might have a smaller body. They might operate during the day, so then they become diurnal. So there's changes that these animals can have that don't necessarily mean they're different species. But again, too, right, the other thing to remember that is that all of these things, all of these questions we're talking about are philosophical in nature, right? The animals know what they are, right? We just happen to want to try and categorize them and put them into a box and say that these animals are this, right? And that's why taxonomy changes, because people's idea of what boxes are best represent a different species change as well.
Yeah, it's keeping them outside. As soon as I did it, it was like probably the first week of putting I have some yearling diamond females that I moved outside.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I did it, I started seeing their behavior and then enjoying things like a rainstorm coming through and having
I'm
a
out
cooler
before the
day.
rain.
Oh yeah, I mean that. The way that they are now, they really have their habits, right? Where they cruise all night, and then in the morning they'll bask up in the branches of their enclosure until maybe 10, 11 a.m. when it really gets hot. And then they move down and they go underground into cork hollows that I have buried under substrate, and they get away from the heat. But if it's a rainy day where it's raining all day, they'll just stay there in the tree. They'll just sit there and get soaked by the rain. It doesn't bother them at all. And then if the
Up and
sun,
they'll drink from the coils. They'll drink
oh yeah,
rainwater from their coils and stuff. Like, they really like rainwater. You'll see them come out in the rain, or even just before it rains. You'll see them come out and actually get into a position where they're going to get wet.
wow, it's so cool. I
Uses them
absolutely.
when she's about to hang out the washing, right? She'll go and have a look at the diamond bite and see if the diamonds are out. If the diamonds are all out, she won't hang out the washing outside.
Yeah, it's today I'm actually going to be finishing up my outdoor enclosure for the male, which I'm really excited because I think that's going to help with the pushing and rubbing, as well as he's going into a 6 foot long by 5 foot tall enclosure on the inside. So he's going to have a lot of space to be able to move around, and I'm super excited for that. It's going to be just great getting him into a bigger area so he can, stretch out and hopefully stop with this rubbing nonsense. Which I think, the top of the enclosure was screen, and I think he was rubbing, he was pushing on the top of that because it had some give to it. And I think that once he felt that give, he just kept pushing on that. And that's where that injury came in. And so I had taken some corrugated plastic and I stuck it up on the top. So now it's a smooth surface with less give. And I think that kind of helped curb that behavior a little bit.
So is your wire all painted black?
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's important to paint it black because it allows for better transmission of UV light.
Oh, interesting. And
So
it's good for us too, right? So we can see
makes
it.
it easier for us to see them, right? But the reason they're hard to see is because the light's reflecting back, and that's why we can't see easily through it, right? So it's that light bouncing off it that reflects, but it's not just visible light that reflects as well. It's also the non-visible light, i.e. being things like UV, that reflects through, that gets reflected away from it, that light, with the non-black wire.
Wow. So should I use something like Plasti Dip or something like that and roll it on like a roll on like plastic coating?
Depends on what you're using. Like we use black black rust guard paint
Okay.
on the wire for us. That's what we've used. Works really, really well. So for our parenties outside, we've got that. For our blue tongues, we've got that as well. For our diamonds and stuff like that. Again, all that stuff that's outside have all got um, dark paint on the mesh, so that that light transmits better through there.
What kind of temperatures are you guys dealing with where you're at? Like what are the diamonds subjected to throughout the seasons?
Okay, so winter overnight lows of uh, 6 degrees Celsius.
Oh crap.
Right.
Hold
So
on.
yeah, you're gonna have to get that out. Um, so 40s, I think, from memory, roughly 40s and 50s.
Okay, so
Um,
six Celsius is 42.8. Okay, so that's pretty much right on with what I get here in Florida.
right. So that's what we'll get down to, sort of maximum cool temperatures.
Mm,
Every now and then we'll get down as far low as zero. Um, and
wow.
then, but we'll have got inside those enclosures, we've got straw that sits inside underground hides. So the snakes tend to go into that over winter, or our parentes will go into similar things over winter. The blue tongues will go into that over winter as well. Same sort of thing. So we've got underground hides, so they don't get quite as cold as that, and they're also nice and dry as well. So the animals are sort of activating there. Um,
And and so they're in I just want to like make this clear as day for myself. So they don't have any supplemental heat. They're
no
given the
supplemental heat.
opportunity to get out of that direct, whether it frosts or
Mhm.
whatever's going on. They can get out of that and get into something that is not that temperature. It's probably somewhat insulated. It's dry.
Heat
It's going to be
insulated and
a
dry.
little bit
Yep,
warmer. Okay.
yep. But we're probably only talking, as a percentile, probably 15% warmer. We're not talking
Yeah.
much warmer at all, right? But it is dry, it's not wet. And then, daytime highs in winter are probably around the 22, 23 degree mark. Um, so, mid 60s, I think, low 60s. Um, so that's
Yeah.
sort of the temperature.
23 is like 74 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so high 60s, right? I suppose.
Okay.
Um, and then to this time, right, overnight lows of around 10 degrees, daytime highs of about 30, right? And then we're end of winter now. Um, when we get into summer, overnight lows of about 22, 23 degrees, daytime highs up to about 38, 40 degrees.
All right, let's see what 40 is. So 40 would be 104 degrees.
Yep.
So, where I'm at, I'm like essentially the same distance from the equator as probably you guys are, just in the
Yeah.
northern hemisphere. So we're definitely, I think we have much more humidity and a lot more rain during our summer. It's I
So
think,
what's your humidity?
shoot, I mean, I'm not sure what it is like right now, but I know that our daytime temperature will be mid 90s, mid to upper 90s. But the humidity, makes it feel like it's up to 106 degrees, with the humidity. Um,
Yeah. Um, yeah, our humidity at the moment is 97%.
oh, okay. All right. So just as humid.
So,
And
yeah,
it's, and so for the entire
I
winter,
must admit, when people say to me, "Oh, it's really humid here," I sort of laugh. I'm like, yeah, it's not that too bad. It's not that bad. And
yeah,
I've had a few people from Florida here, and they've all said the same thing. Oh, this is just like home, you know. I'm like, yeah, and I said,
nice.
doesn't seem to be too bad. And they're like, oh, does it get much more humid than this? I said, yeah, yeah, this is pretty good. Um, but it's funny, like we've had some of the guys from the northern part of the US here as well, and you see they sort of struggle a little bit sometimes in the heat. So No. That's all right. It's the same everywhere. I struggle in the cold. I'd hate to be around where it was snowing. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, same here. I mean, we'll go on vacation to places that are cold or rainy, and man, if I have a day like a full day of cloud and rain, I get depressed, because I'm just acclimated to the sun being out, it being hot. It's all what you're acclimated to. I don't like a wet winter day, that goes on for 3 or 4 days. I can't deal with that.
And nothing worse. So cold and wet is not good. Warm and wet's okay. I can go froggy when it's warm and wet, and then I can go chasing frog-eating snakes when it's warm and wet. So that's not so bad.
So how are you feeding your outdoor diamonds during the throughout the year? I'm assuming that during the winter they're totally off of food.
I haven't fed them yet. I'm waiting. I'll still wait. I wait until we see the marked change in this season. Um, and then once I see that change in the season, I'm comfortable that the animals are going to be okay. Um, I'll also watch their behaviour. So when I'm starting to see them sitting in ambush every night, ready to go, they're telling me that they're ready to eat. And so what I'll do then is I'll feed them during the day, I'll feed them early, and I'll feed them a small meal. And then I'll watch the temperatures beforehand as well to make sure that we're not getting a cold snap or anything like that. And then I'll sort of make sure that we've got nice, particularly when it's cooler and cool nighttime temperatures, then I'm making sure that those animals are getting the right temperatures so that we don't get food rot or anything like that in their guts. Um, and then once they're up to their warm body temperatures, then sorry, once it's getting to the warm temperatures for the season, then they just sort of transition into their food. They'll eat for 9 months of the year, and then they'll slow down, and then that's what'll happen then. So
Interesting. And have because I've talked to some friends and they're like, they're like, boy, they're like, I wouldn't be concerned about the Florida winter and them getting cool, but I'm more concerned about the summer heat, and so with you guys getting up to 104 degrees, how do you find that they escape from that heat the same way that they
we
get
run
away from the, I'm sorry?
we run shade sails on everything in summer.
What is
So
that?
I'll set up shade sails. I'll set up
Okay. Okay.
you see them in fern houses and stuff like that, where they put like shade cloth over the top of
Yeah.
everything, so it still allows airflow and stuff like that, but it's all shaded. So
Okay.
I'll set that up over the top of all the enclosures in summer. So I've got those that sort of roll out, and then I'll roll them off, set them up so the animals are all in shade at that time of year, so they're all shaded all year round.
Okay.
In the hottest part of the year. And so basically I'm looking at the temperatures. So when I'm starting to see daytime temps upwards of 32, 33, 34 degrees Celsius, that's when I'm making sure that I've got the shade sails rolled out at that point. So it just means that the enclosures themselves don't get up and over 35, 36 degrees over the whole enclosure. Parts of the enclosure will get to that temperature and will exceed that, but there will also be other parts of the enclosure that will stay cooler than that.
Okay. So it's all about just kind of giving them the ability to get away from it if they want to.
Yeah, give them the ability to choose. They're experts in doing what they want to do. So let
Mm.
them choose.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I get nervous about it. Diamond pythons aren't cheap over here in America, and it's not just the cost of the animal. Obviously, it's a living animal, so I
And so cost
desperately.
is irrelevant. It's the animal. The animal is the thing. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and it's the amount of time and effort that you put into raising that animal, and it's like you so desperately want to, at least me personally, I so desperately want to do right by them and make sure that that they're not being too stressed out by keeping outside.
well, you've got through your full summer now, right? You're almost at you. year three a hot part. I would think for the most part, you might get one or two really hot days, I suppose, before it starts to cool off. It starts to get a little bit cooler. Um,
Yeah, we don't cool down until probably December. We'll still be in the 80s. So I guess that would be like mid 30s for you guys until November, and then we start
yeah,
getting
but
some
that's
of the
during the
cool.
day, though, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
What's it dropping to at night,
I'd have to look. It's
roughly?
Yeah, probably, still probably upper 70s, I would say, maybe low 80s. It still stays pretty warm at night. But then once we start getting cold at night, then it stays that way for quite a while, I would say until maybe March, April, where it's still
This is what
cool at
I'm.
night.
But if you've gone through the hottest part of the year now, and you're starting on the cooler trajectory, then
Yeah.
the animal's probably going to be okay. But I would still set up shade sails over the top of my animals during the hot times of year. Um, and then you can also increase the cooling aspect to that if you can set up like a sprinkler system over the top as well. All right.
Yeah.
So have a sprinkler system and shade sails set up. So once the temperature hits 36 degrees Celsius, right, whatever that happens to be in Fahrenheit, so that might be 98 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. As soon as it
Yeah.
hits 98 degrees Fahrenheit, set your sprinkler on. Your sprinkler runs for 20 minutes at a time, right? And all that does is it just brings down through evaporative cooling. It drops the temperature down on that enclosure down from 98 degrees down to 90 degrees or 88 degrees or something like that. It brings down that temperature a little bit to a little bit better temperature for those snakes to be dealing with.
Yeah, I've got all this stuff in my Amazon cart for like mister heads, and all
Hmm?
the tubing and everything, and I plan on just kind of plumbing the enclosure and then putting they have these Wi-Fi valves that you can put on your hose bib and have that set to open up, throughout the day.
And that'll work just fine, right? And if you have that set up to like we've got a temperature sensor, say in our snake building, so that we've got temperature alarm system in there. So if it hits, we've got air conditioners in there and all the rest of it on a reverse thermostat. So once it gets to a certain temperature, the air conditioner kicks on and it cools down the temperature of the room. Um, but then likewise, the temperature inside the enclosures doesn't get above a certain temperature either. So we want to make sure that our temperatures don't get too hot. Temperatures get too hot, then we need to make sure what we're doing there is a little bit more controlled. So
Mm.
yeah.
I want to talk to you about adders because they're really
Mhm.
fascinating. They're kind of like they remind me so much of vipers, but they're not. And
Right.
you guys keep those, right?
Yep. Yeah, we've got 5 species of Death Adder. And they the behaviour of those is very reminiscent of vipers. Effectively, they occupy the same ecological niche as vipers, so they're an ambush predator. They've got a caudal lure, and they've got very strong muscular heads that hold on to their prey. Um, while a very strong venom subdues that prey. Live bearers produce anywhere between 5 and 20 offspring that are a pain in the ass to get feeding for the most part. Um,
And they're
but
tiny
like
too, right? They're like the babies are absolutely tiny.
some of them are very small. Some of them are very small, like 1.5 grams.
Oh my God, 1.5 grams,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
dude.
yeah. They're small.
I mean,
Some
they
of
could
them
sit
are
on a
very
quarter,
small.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they
Jeez.
are very, very, very small. So those things are eating like neonate skinks. They're eating baby skinks. There's they come out at the same time as the baby skinks are. So
Wow.
designed to eat very small meals. So you're feeding them things like pinky legs.
Wow. And what are
Yeah.
you keeping them in? Like how do you keep something that small secure?
Oh, they're like a plastic container in a rack system.
Wow.
But no, all of them have got lids. See, this is the other thing. All the rack systems that I've used over the years, they all have lids.
Interesting.
I don't like a rack system that doesn't have a lid on it. So,
Yeah, I guess that would
you
be
know,
really important when it comes to venomous, right?
yeah. Well, when you open that thing, you want something there over the top. It can be a bit fiery. I've got friends who've got, that keep elapids in things like freedom breeder racks and stuff like that, and it works great. But there's risk when you're opening those enclosures.
Yeah.
So yeah, with death adders, it's just like keeping vipers. So they're uh, they're like keeping venomous fish or something like that. Yeah, there's something you don't touch, you don't play with them. So you know, but they're beautiful captives, beautiful snakes to work with.
Mm.
Yeah.
Are they pretty stressed out and easy to get agitated, or are they fairly laid back in captivity?
Like most elapids, they're pretty laid back. Yeah. I find pythons are harder to deal with for the most part than most venomous snakes. Most venomous snakes are much more quiet than pythons. Pythons are angry things. I find it funny, right? Like you see some people working around with venomous, and you see, the running joke is that they've pulled out a tiger snake or a brown snake or a black snake, and they haven't used a hook, and I got to get I got to get a carpet out, better go get a hook, because I don't want to get bitten by the carpet.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Do you? Oh, and with your diamond pythons that you keep outside, are they cohabbed? Do you have them in groups, or are they all kept individually?
Individually at the moment. So yeah, we
Okay.
have cohabbed them in the past. I prefer to keep stuff solitary where I can.
Is that just easier from a feeding perspective? And when it comes time for breeding, do you view that as kind of giving them a new stimulus where then they're put together?
More like what they would have in the wild. They don't tend to live in groups outside.
Okay.
Certain times of the year they might come together for a breeding ball or something like that. But in the case of diamond pythons, but generally speaking, they're solitary animals. And then same thing with the lizards as well. But it's not so practical to keep lizards apart, considering the size of the enclosures that you keep the lizards in versus the stock level that you might have. So you might end up keeping more than one lizard in an enclosure, and maybe even more than one species in the same enclosure as well. With regards
Okay.
to lizards. So,
All
mm.
right. Yeah, it's there's a lot to digest there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So the new book is Snakes of Australia, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the new one is this one here.
Look at that.
So we're talking about aspidites on the cover. There's an aspidites on the cover there. So
Yeah, it's a
that's
beautiful
the
photo.
that's the third edition of the Snakes of Australia. Really, really cost effective book. That one, that's $30 Australian, so US that's like it's $15, $16 or something like that, and you can get it off
Wow.
Amazon and stuff like that as well. So yeah, nice and easy to
Awesome.
get. Covers all 240 species and subspecies of Australian snake. That one though it's more designed for the beginner, whereas the Princeton guide is more designed for your herper. There's a lot more information in that. They aren't designed for reptiles in captivity. They're talking about animals in the wild. Um, but it provides a whole heap of images of animals with localities and range maps and all that sort of stuff. Um, the latest husbandry book that we've done is Australasian Elapids, which is um, probably one of the most comprehensive books on venomous husbandry that's ever been produced. And it's the book itself covers snake husbandry to a level that's generally fairly significant as well. It's a much higher level than what you see in most other publications as well. We talk about reptile lighting, we talk about quarantine procedures, selection of stock, um, venomous room design. All of that stuff is equally applicable to other reptile design. How you set up a reptile room is the same whether you're keeping in venomous or not. Considerations of escape, considerations of temperature, considerations of security. is um, is across the board. So yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna put the link to that book in the description. You can get
yeah,
the
please.
hardcover Princeton. What did it say? Princeton.
Princeton, I think it's Snakes of
Uh,
Australia. I think it's about $45 US, roughly.
$36.
There you go, man. $36.
Yeah, I mean, $36. It's a hardcover, and we've got Snakes of Australia, Princeton Field Guides
Yeah,
is
that's
what they
fine.
have it listed here.
Yeah,
So,
and about 1,100 photos in that book.
oh wow, yeah, I
Right,
like
like
pictures.
it's yeah, people like pictures, right? And like just the we were talking about carpets before. Um, the carpet pythons that are in there are all wild carpets. Um, so
Wow. Hey, that jungle looks. Is that a jungle there? On the one page, second from the top to
yeah,
the.
yeah,
That's very black and yellow for a wild jungle.
yeah, yeah, 100%. That's Innisfail animal. So the Innisfail animals are pretty good. They're a pretty good looking cricketer, that's for sure. And we tried to
Wow.
make sure we used animals in that you know we didn't we didn't provide photos for say the complete carpet and things like that as well, right? So and a heap of our images are in the complete carpet, the more complete carpet as well. No Nick for many years and Justin as well, and always happy to help those guys out with regards to images of Australian critters. So looking forward to the new Asperities bits that they're working on as well. So that'll be cool with Justin,
Oh yeah.
with and Lee. So
Yeah, Lucas.
Lucas
Yep.
Lee's book. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one too.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that one. Yeah, it's well that's super cool that that's available on Amazon. That's not it's not always the case with the Australian books where it's so easy to get at such a low cost.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, if we ship to the US, or we did ship to the US, that's literally changed overnight. At the moment, with regards to this tariff thing that's going on at the moment, but I'm sure that'll get sorted out at some point in time soonish, and we'll be able to ship to the US again soon. But if people are chasing signed copies, we'll sign them. The stuff's available from our website. So um, the other thing we do as well is we just like everybody else, it seems, we're doing a podcast as well. So we've got our own podcast as well, which is called Cold Blooded Contributions, where Pi and I talk to herpers across the globe. So at some point in time, Adam, we're going to have to get you on our show
Oh
as
man.
well at some point, man. Get you on ours and go through that. But we do ours live, right? So that's a
Oh
little bit
boy.
different as well. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
keep it's all warts and all for us. So it's a bit of fun, but it's good.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good too to get some people interaction and stuff like that as well. Where you get people in there and they talk, of course, and stuff like that as well. Which is fun.
I need to step up my herping game before I can come on because I feel
Yeah.
like whenever I go out it's just dumb luck. Anytime I find anything, it's just I feel like I just got lucky. I mean we went hiking in Georgia just a few weeks ago, and every single time we went out I had my hook with me, and
Yeah.
I saw so many spots where I was like, there's a copperhead in there. I know for a fact, it's this, it's like the perfect spot, but I'm with my family and a friend, and we're hiking along, and I can't hold them up every single spot. It was more of a, we were out for the hike, not out for herping, so I just, and sure enough, on the way back, we got lucky, and I came across a copperhead, and
Sweet.
yeah, after that I was like, we can go home now. I don't even I got everything I needed out of this trip.
My wife has learnt that wherever we go, I'm herping. I'm always herping. Right. Even when we're walking through some places, I'll be walking through somewhere and I'll be like, oh, there's this there or that there or whatever. So, you know, um, you get used to it. Always herp all the time. Why not? Doesn't hurt. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's the beauty of taking my oldest son out, just me and him, is he
mm,
is all about herping, even if, and for him seeing a black racer, even though we might see 6 on one hike, it's like he's seeing the first one every time, and it's, so
Mate.
it's always,
Foster that behavior. That's what you want. That's awesome.
oh yeah, he's so into it, which is, it's great to see that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'd be super excited to see a black racer and a copperhead too. So, it's what you're used to seeing, right? I see a carpet python here, I call it a carpet. You know,
Yeah,
so in the more complete carpet python, there's a photo of a carpet python that's just sitting in our backyard, and
really.
it's not set up or anything like that. It's just a carpet that was just sitting in the back of our house, right next to the
Wow.
snake building. So, it's one of those things they're our typical sort of house snake. You guys have got black rat snakes as your house snake. We've got carpet pythons.
Yeah. Yeah. Even the Eastern Diamondbacks, I don't think I've ever seen one of those alive and well. I've seen one alive that I had to, or semi-alive that had just been run over that I had to dispatch. And, that was, terrible, especially since my neighbor ran it over intentionally. But now, I've been talking to people in my area, and I've gotten some information on really hot areas, that they cruise in the fall, in like the early fall, end of summer. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to start cruising those areas in the next couple of
Gives them
months.
plenty
And
of distance. There's a snake that's got a very long strike range, and they're
yeah,
very accurate. And not a good thing to get bitten by. I mean,
no,
nothing's good. Nothing venomous is good to be bitten by, but yeah, it would start getting smoked by an adamantius, that's for sure.
yeah, I have a 40-inch hook, and
Mm,
I plan on, using every inch of that.
100%. 100%. 100%. Well, it's 1:45 here now, mate.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you staying up late and taking the time to talk to me. I wish, Ty the best, and I'm sad she couldn't join us, but I completely understand. And
We'll have to do a part 2 at some point in time, and definitely get her on at some point in time for sure. That'd be good.
yeah, yeah, we'll get you back on. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
No worries, man. All right, you have a great night, Adam.